Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Board Masters with me, Chris Mullins, and today I will be giving my thoughts and review of Crypt of Chaos, which I've done a number of gameplays on the channel, so check those out in the playlist if you want to have a look at the game in action. And as ever with my reviews, I will be following the existing structure that I've established in the previous ones, so I'll be going over the 5 categories of art style and theme, component quality, accessibility, replayability and gameplay. Got my notes here, and let's dive straight into how I feel about Crypt of Chaos. In terms of the art style and theme, I covered some of this in the unboxing video, where obviously the art style is pretty generic. It is standard high fantasy, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I do like the art. I think the character cards inside the box are gorgeous, and it's just sometimes I would love a bit more variability with it. There is one potential, it's not an issue for me as such, but what other people may not like about the game is, I know, for example, in the campaign for Tiny Epic Dungeons recently, there was an issue where a couple of people thought one of the characters was too sexualized, and the creators of the game agreed and changed the art style, and that blew up all in the comment section. And if you're the sort of person who is worried about over-sexualization of characters in the game, then you may have an issue with this one, because I know Avenelith and Wolfhowl, who were the 2 characters that Stace and I used in the 2-player gameplay, neither of them are particularly well dressed, shall we say. Again, not an issue for me, but just is something that may come up for other people. In terms of the theme, it's a little bit inconsistent for me. Like, for example, on the cover you've got this creepy wraith, and it's based in a crypt, so you think, oh, okay, it's going to be ghosts and goblins, this sort of thing, but the wraith is not in the game at all. The end boss of the crypt is a dragon, and you know, I love dragons as much as the next man. I'm always happy to have a dragon in the game, but in a crypt where it's suggested that, I suppose it's a 3-level dungeon. It doesn't suggest whether it's going above ground or below, but I guess the preconception when you're going into a dungeon is that you're heading down in deeper levels. And would a big dragon live on the 3rd level of a dungeon underground? And maybe having the big wraith as the big bad of a crypt would have made more thematic sense. Again, it doesn't harm the game in any way. It's just maybe a little thematic niggle that I would have appreciated if it was maybe a little bit more consistent, perhaps. In terms of the components, as I've mentioned already, the player cards are gorgeous, and I think they're like tarot card size. Again, never having held a tarot card, I'm not 100% sure that's the measurement, but that's my impression of them. They are really impressive and gorgeous. The rest of the components are absolutely fine. It is a game that has a really low price point and is obviously designed to be as compact as possible, so you're not going to get stunningly high production components. It's just not something you can expect for the price point, and it's fine. I have no issue with them at all. They complement the gameplay really nicely. I have to admit, based on the characters, I would love to have a bunch of minis for this game, but again, I appreciate why they're not there. In terms of accessibility, and this is I think a really big plus point for Crypt of Chaos, as I mentioned, it's got a small price point, so you can easily get hold of it for under 20 quid. It's quick to set up and put away. It's really, really easy to learn. I mean, prior to recording it with Stace, she played 2 games and then felt like she understood the game perfectly enough to be filmed playing it. And there are some levels of depth and things that you need to explore once you've got the key mechanics down, but I'll probably cover those more in the gameplay. But yeah, it's cheap to acquire, it's easy to learn, and it's easy to get to the table. So in terms of accessibility, Crypt of Chaos is an excellent game. In terms of the replayability, again, it's a strong category for the game as well. as you can see from the box, you've got the 6 core characters who all have their varying stats and abilities. On top of that, you've got the very style of the game where you're laying tiles to create a dungeon as you go, so you've got that variability and randomness from the dungeon tiles. Then you've got the variability and randomness from the chest tokens, and so one game you'll draw lots of enemies quickly, and another game you'll have loads of empty spaces and you'll be able to get a few free chests before you even get into a combat. And then on top of that, you may get a game where your first few chests are all traps. Like, it certainly felt like that way in my solo gameplay. I seem to trigger every trap in the place. And then you'll have games where you get armor and weapons straight away, and you're already beefed up and you can start ploughing through a bit of combat. So the very nature of the game means that no 2 games are ever going to be the same. And you've also got Chaos Mode, where you pick a character and you enter the dungeon with the specific gear that you have equipped, and there's no exploring of chests or anything. It's just, how do you navigate the puzzle of the dungeon with the gear that you have. It probably doesn't work as well 2-player. I obviously last week did a video with Stace where we played a 2-player Chaos Mode, and it probably, I don't know if it makes any difference between 1 and 2-player, because when we played it, it just became sort of a puzzle of how do you arrange the dungeon tiles to minimise the combat before you find the dragon. And so I suppose that's going to be the same whether it's 1 or 2 players. And yeah, it's a fun extra mode, but I don't know if it adds a huge amount to the game. But I haven't tried it with all the characters. I've only done a couple of games. So yeah, as I've said, it's definitely a fun mode and a fun addition and a nice puzzle. But if you get a good draw with the cards, like we seem to in that Chaos Mode, we got to the dragon needing only 2 or 3 fights prior to that, so it's a bit of a romp, really. And with that obviously leads me into the gameplay category, and again, it's a strong one for it. It's a really, really fun game, and the puzzle it presents is really, really interesting. I think it was really fun getting to know the nuances of the game. Like I mentioned in my solo playthrough, I think that coming from video games, I've always been a bit of a completionist, and I need to explore every area of the map and kill every baddie I come across and things like that. And trying to do that in Crypt of Chaos, particularly in solo, is just not going to happen. You just cannot absorb that level of damage unless you get exceptionally fortunate with your draws in terms of the gear you acquire and in terms of the character and monster attack decks. And having mentioned those attack decks, I really, really love the additional strategic element to it. And again, I'll cite back to the solo gameplay where I was getting really close to the end. I was at a point where I could go and attack the dragon, but I knew based on the attack decks that I couldn't kill the dragon before the dragon killed me, because we know what's in the decks. So I knew I needed to have an extra battle against the fire wraith in order to find that stronger bit of equipment, and hope that I could escape that battle with minimal damage, so that I would then do enough damage on average to the dragon to kill him before he killed me. Whereas if you just had a die, you would probably just chance it and hope to get high rolls. And whilst that has its own merits and is perfectly fun and enjoyable in countless games, I really enjoyed the fact that they did something different in this. And you know, you couldn't just rely on dumb luck over the course of a long battle. In the smaller fights initially, where you're fighting like a shroud spider and you could just go in and hope to get a +2 or a +3 and kill it straight out. But over the longer fights, there is an extra tactical and strategic depth that I really, really didn't expect, and also really enjoyed when it was there. As I've alluded to already, I think 2 players is a lot easier, and whether that's a negative or not for you will be your own taste, I guess. I think maybe, as Stace and I alluded to in our two-handed playthrough, I think going forward we would probably house rule it that you can't share gear, because I think that does make the game a bit too easy, because obviously the enemies and the gear and everything that you can acquire through the dungeon is the same for 1 player to 2 player. It doesn't scale at all. The only limitation is that you can have 1 player in a 2 player game equipping both the boots of bounding and the axe of picking. So you can have 1 character have all the armor and the strongest weapon for 1 fight, and then pass all that gear to the next person for the next fight, and then have 1 person, and then pass back and forth the amulet of awareness if you're worried about opening a chest with a trap, for example. And it just means you're always at your max possible equip level and minimizing damage, and if you take too much damage, you've got another character who can just take over the fights for you. Whereas with a solo game, you're obviously got that same combat and gear drive, but you have to try and get that gear and get through the battles minimizing that damage as much as possible. And I certainly enjoyed that strategic nuance a bit more than the 2-player game. It is possible to lose the 2-player game. Certainly we came very, very close on a number of occasions when we were learning. It will depend definitely on the characters you pick. Will obviously make the game easier or harder. Stace played as Venelith in that 2-player game, and her ability to make rock trolls and fire wraiths only have 1 HP is almost like a cheat code. It's such a huge advantage to have that. But if you were going in with, for example, Arch Morgana, who can sneak past rock trolls but doesn't kill anything automatically, and I don't know, maybe Wolfhowl, who doesn't have a special ability as such, or with Baleblood the Orc, who gets extra strength against goblins, then you're not getting free kills, so you will accrue a fair amount more damage, particularly if you're getting bad draws on the attack deck. So, you know, it's as hard or as easy as you want it at times. If you want to just blaze through it, then a Venelith is always going to help with that. But all in all, this game really did exceed my expectations. As I mentioned in the unboxing, Crystal Dagger Games were kind enough to send me a free review copy. They're not sponsoring the video in any way, but they did send me the review copy for free. And I have endeavoured to be as objective as possible. Obviously, for me, this is the first time anyone's ever sent me a review copy of a game, so it was really, really exciting, and I'm really, really grateful. But at the same time, I have to be honest, because if I'm going to allow myself to be sort of swayed by their generosity and not give my honest opinion, then there's no point in me doing this. So I have been as objective as possible, and thankfully it's a game that I really, really enjoyed, so I'm able to speak highly of it. And yeah, I don't really see, obviously if you're playing with higher player counts, there is a 2-player limit, so it's not going to be applicable to you there. And if you have any of the issues with, like, the things I raised earlier, like for example the sexualization of the characters, then it's not going to be a game for you. But otherwise I would definitely recommend it, because it is a really, really fun game, and with its low price point, it's easy to get to the table, it's quick and easy to learn, and you're going to have plenty of fun with it. So yeah, overall I would definitely give it an 8.5 out of 10, which is, again, higher than I expected when I heard about the game. So it was a very pleasant surprise for me, and I'll put the link to their website down below if you want to check it out. So thank you for joining me for that, and I'll leave it there. So look after yourself, thank you for watching, stay safe and have a good one. Bye bye now.